Well, hello all you wonderful people out there in YouTube land, and welcome to the Texas Special YouTube channel. And for this month's edition of Mo's Hobby Shop, we're going to take a look at this Life-Like Proto 2000 Heritage Steam Collection Chesapeake Ohio number 44060 steam switcher. Now this locomotive is equipped with DCC Wow Sound Steam 101 decoder. And it has been programmed to the road number. So, if you are unfamiliar with Life-Like's Proto series, they were in the early to mid 2000s. I'm talking pre-2010. They were Life-Like's answer to Bachmann Spectrum and a poor man's Broadway Limited. So you open the box by lifting off the lid here. Once you lift off the lid, set it over to the side, and you find the propaganda packet. There you can see nice little information packet about steam switchers and their contribution, and a rundown of all the railroads that owned them, the road numbers, class, what they ran on, coal or fuel oil, the year they were built, quantity of locomotives owned, builder, all kinds of cool information. Recollections from railroaders. This is, quite honestly, I have to say, one of the most interesting propaganda packets I have seen yet. Alright, your warranty card, owner's manual, Proto 2000 HO scale accessories order form, and a certificate of quality. Okay, now you see this magnificent foam. You remove the foam, and there you find the locomotive. You have some additional detail parts here. A cab curtain, looks like some kind of steps, and some kind of, I'm not sure what that is, that little black square thing. I don't know if that's a hatch or a cover or what that is. We'll put that back. Now the tender just kind of rests in the foam. It's just kind of chilling there. No cradle or anything like you would expect to see. The locomotive itself rests in the foam inside of a protective cradle, inside of a plastic sleeve. So we remove the sleeve from the plastic cradle, and then we hit this unlocking tab right here on the top by the headlight. Pull that up, lift that up, and the locomotive is free, and we'll set it on the track next to the box. And if you give me just one moment, when we come back, I'll show you how the locomotive and tender are mated together. I'm not sure who exactly came up with this design, but I frickin' love them for it. Okay, so HO scale steam locomotives normally have these annoying little small little plugs that my big O-gauge fingers are not used to manipulating, and for quite frankly, they give me anxiety trying to plug them up and unplug them because, you know, a lot of these steam engines that I review are not mine, so I don't want to break them. I don't want to tear them up. And Life-Like Proto 2000, they have this ingenious little wonderful little plug right here. This is the female end. Right here underneath the cab, that's the male end. Okay, instead of trying to manipulate this itty bitty little small little microscopic frickin' plug into this equally itty bitty little microscopic little hole that you can barely see, and you have to hold the locomotive at an odd angle to do so, all you got to do is this. This is it. It's just this simple. Line it up, and boom, they're coupled together. Sweet baby Jesus. Why couldn't it be like that for every locomotive? Why? Probably because it makes sense. While we're on the underside of the locomotive, we'll go ahead and take a look at some of the details on the tender. So as you can see there, we've got plenty of air brake. Well, maybe not plenty, but we've got the air brake detail and, you know, underframe detail. You've got the air brake piston, you've got some of the rigging and whatnot, and you also, I'm not sure how well you can see it, but you have these nifty little chains right here. These little chains. There's chains on each corner of each truck, and they're actual chain. So that is a really cool feature. Something else you'll notice while we're on the underside of this engine, you'll see there's these little brass bars here. Well, those are to aid with electrical pickup. So this locomotive gets electrical pickup across all wheels of the locomotive itself and the tender. And of course, while we're under here, you can see the body mounted magnetic knuckle coupler. Since we started off with the tender, we're just going to go ahead and keep that train rolling. No pun intended. Or maybe it is. I don't know. One thing I did notice about this locomotive is that the coal bunker is a little loose. That's because the previous owner installed the DCC decoder in the tender, which is common practice for HO scale steam locomotives, if you didn't know, because that's usually where there's the most space to do so. So I'm trying to be mindful of that and being very careful with this guy, because this has tried to pop off on me a couple of times. While we're looking at the coal tent or coal bunker, you'll notice this little nubbin sticking out here, this little pipe looking thing. Well, that is actually a mechanical stoker. It's a steam driven, kind of like an auger or drill bit looking device. And what it does is it saves the the fireman's back. Okay, instead of hand firing this thing, you know, the old school way that everybody knows about, big old snow shovel looking thing into the coal and then into the firebox. No, fireman just twists a knob that regulates the flow of steam into the auger device, which mechanically stokes the fire and sends the coal from the coal bunker here into the firebox. Very nifty little design that many a brakeman was thankful for, and quite possibly, honestly, made the firing of large steam locomotives, you know, your Hudsons, your Pacifics, your Northerns, your Articulateds, possible. Because I promise you, if they would have relied on a hand-fired big boy, it wouldn't have left the roundhouse. You can see there is some very nicely done decals with regards to the Chesapeake and Ohio. Very nicely, evenly applied, no flaking, no fading, no transparency, and a very clean separation between the black of the tender body and the yellow or gold, whatever you want to call it, of the lettering of the Chesapeake and Ohio. You've got some pretty good rivet detailing all along the side of the body of this thing. You have some freestanding, separately applied grab irons here and here. And then, of course, the chains. The chains are just the the money shot for me. I'm getting a kick out of those chains. If you've been watching the channel for a while, then you know I have an Alaska Railroad 080. Of course, it's an O gauge, and it's got the same setup with the chains on the tender. And I don't know what it is. I think it's a cool detail. All right, you have these friction bearing trucks here. To my eye, they look right. I'm not a big C&O fan, and I'm not that familiar with the intricacies of steam locomotives. So, to my eye, it looks right. It could be completely wrong, you know. You have a separately applied coupler lever here, which you'll see a little bit better in a minute, and you do have the footboard, brakeman's footboard here. When we rotate this guy so that you can see the rear of the tender, you get a little bit better view of the headlight. I'm not sure if it's operable or not. There's supposed to be a grab iron right here that's missing. You have these little hatches here on the back side of the coal bunker. You have a freestanding grab iron right here. You have polling pockets in the correct location on the rear corners of the frame of the tender. And you have very nice detailing on these brakeman's footboards, and you have some pretty good wood grain detailing along this wooden beam here. It's plastic, but it's meant to model a black painted wooden beam along the rear pilot, and of course the operating magnetic knuckle coupler. Looking at the top side of the tender, you see you have the water filling hatch, you have loads of rivet detailing, a very nicely done coal load. And you can see the safety tread, slip resistant safety tread that's simulated here on the deck of the front of the tender. And speaking of the front of the tender, we're going to whip that bad boy around, and there you can see a nice shot of the doors situated on the front of the coal bunker. This little opening here, when these locomotives were originally built, they were not mechanically stoked. They were the OG firemen with a big shovel. So I'm sure that this is prototypical in that they kept that capability in the event it was needed. You have this beam detailing underneath here, and you have the frame detailing here. And then of course there's the female end of the plug that couples the locomotive to the tender. And now that I look at it, I see that this stirrup step right here on the other side of the locomotive has been broken off. I don't see any other additional details missing. So you've got a missing hand railing that's supposed to go along the back side of this, and this stirrup step here is broken off as well. Other than that, tender looks great. Frickin' bravo, Proto 2000. Too bad y'all don't exist anymore. And that's not sarcasm, that's too bad. Alright, now looking at the locomotive on this thing. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, there is detail beyond detail on this locomotive. Alright, you got wires going to the frickin' whistle and the bell. Okay, you got all the freestanding, separately applied piping there, the air pump. You got, as far as I'm aware, accurate valve gear and side rod detailing. You've got this detail here all along the underside. You got the power reverser right here. You got everything that's supposed to be there. You have some immaculate detailing on the side of the firebox. Okay, this is one hell of a little locomotive. All right, I'm not a C&O guy. I kind of want this thing. The number 44, very nicely done. I just can't say enough about this little guy. The only thing missing on this engine, what my eye can see, the only thing missing is a legible builder's plate, which that's the builder's plate right there, just cast onto the locomotive's boiler. We rotate this guy around to the front to look at the business end. You see freestanding grab iron, separately applied uncoupling lever, a little air hose for the train line, magnetic operating knuckle coupler, poling pockets in the correct spot. See a footboard there for the brakeman. No number here. Operating headlight. Nice detail on this smoke box door. Very nice detail on the smoke box door. Now looking at the engineer side of the engine, you see more of the same in the way of outstanding detail, and you can see these like that is the turbo generator, which used steam pressure from the boiler to spin a little turbine inside the housing, which generated the electricity that powered the headlights and the cab lighting and all that wonderful stuff. And now that I look at it, there's even little stipulations here where you can see it models the cab windows opening in the front. We come around to the back of the engine, and you can see there's not really a whole lot of detail in the cab of the engine itself. I mean, that's a relatively small space, and it's a relatively you're not going to see a whole lot of it anyway, so I'm not too torn up about there being a lack of detail in there. I do think it's cool that they have this freestanding detail right here. I believe that is the throttle. Don't quote me on that though. And there are seat boxes in there for the engineer and the fireman. No seat boxes for the brakeman. Alright, now we have this guy together and on the track. Let's fire it up. I'm going to punch in the locomotive's address 44 on the good old Zephyr. Headlight. Kind of quiet. It is firing up. It's kind of quiet. Let's listen to the bell. Very nice trail off on that bell. The bell could be adjusted a little bit louder. Very nice whistle. I have played with this thing a little bit, and I noticed that every time it stops, you get the whistle going off. So about 10% throttle on the Zephyr is when this thing actually starts creeping. But the wheels are turning so slow that the decoder thinks it's stopping, so it blows the whistle. Even though it's actually moving, it's just moving very slowly. So we will back this thing up, and you can see a little bit there that the rear headlight the number boards on the sides of the rear headlight come on. So I'm going to shift the camera around, and we'll get a look at this guy coming at the camera from the rear. Well, alright boys and girls, ain't nothing left to do but crack the throttle on this thing, couple up to a short little 6-car freight train I've assembled of mostly transition era freight cars, and see what she does. Well, apparently 6 cars is just a little too much for the old girl. So after a lot of trial and error, it was determined that the best this little guy could muster was 3 cars and a caboose. And there's still a pretty good amount of wheel slip. Now, that being said, this is a locomotive that hasn't seen a whole lot of runtime, so their nickel plating on the wheels is still pretty good coat. And the Stars Hollow Railroad is 18-inch radius curvature plus unlevel railroad. I'm sure this thing would do a lot better on wider radius and more level track. Well, she's a snappy looking little engine, but unfortunately way underperformed my expectations as far as actual pulling power. Now, I'm willing to give this old girl a handicap of maybe 2 or 3 cars because of the curvature and the uneven gradient on this railroad, but even still, I was hoping for at least a good 4 or 5 car freight train. Now, that being said, these little 060 switchers were never meant for mainline operation, at least not in the way of like your Pacifics and your Northerns and whatnot. These guys did touch the main line in local service for short, distances, going from the yard to a customer, things and such of that nature. But these little guys mostly lived their lives in industries and industrial spurs, things and such of that nature, handling a handful of cars at a time, or in the yards, moving freight cars around in the freight yards or passenger stations. So I'm a little disappointed, but then again, it is what it is. It's still a fantastic looking engine, and I mean the plug-in drawbar is I love it. I love it so much. But this is going to go back in the box, and we'll send it back to Mr. Jim. And I thank y'all for watching. I hope you found it entertaining.